Hello! Homes and people burned to ashes, individuals shot down, a violent conflict with a notorious biker gang, and large quantities of drugs sold on the dark web. All of these are the handiwork of one man. He calls himself the Godfather. Despite being imprisoned in another country, he continues to wreak havoc back home. If he targets you, you are certainly in big trouble, yet there is one important and specific thing he has never been able to accomplish. This is the story of Simo D, also known as the Godfather of Twente. Simo's real name is Mohammed, born in 1980 in Morocco, but he eventually moved to the Netherlands after his parents left Morocco in hopes of a better future. As a child, Simo frequently moved from one boarding school to another. His relationship with his parents deteriorated, and his personality became increasingly difficult to control. Simo began associating with the wrong crowd, leading to frequent run-ins with the police. At the age of 25, Simo purchased a grow shop named Super Grow in Hengelo. This was a place where people could buy equipment to grow plants, from tomatoes to basil and even cannabis, which naturally associated the shop with cannabis cultivation. Owning this shop introduced Simo to individuals familiar with growing cannabis. From there, Simo started connecting with people who dealt in all sorts of drugs, from cannabis to cocaine and more. Eventually, Simo acquired another grow shop called Two in Action, located in Enschede, near the German border. The police suspected that Simo was running a gang from Two in Action, involved in setting up illegal cannabis farms and selling other illicit substances. The shop became the gang's main base. Simo ordered his subordinates to smuggle these substances across the border into Germany using cars, leading to an investigation by both Dutch and German police. In 2012, undercover police officers struck a deal with Simo's gang to purchase 10 kilograms of cocaine. However, the gang members were unaware of the sting operation, and when they arrived at the meeting point, they were arrested. At the time of the botched deal, Simo was already in custody for another crime. During a dispute at a cafe, Simo had pulled out a gun and shot a man 6 times. The victim was hit in the leg, but fortunately survived. Simo was sentenced to 4 years in prison for this incident, and during his incarceration, prosecutors also charged him with involvement in the gang operating out of Two in Action. Simo always denied being the leader of any gang or being involved in drug trafficking. A witness used by the prosecutors stated, "I received 10,000 euros from Simo to put my name on a cannabis farm, and he was always the true owner." Simo, on the other hand, said, "Sometimes I delivered materials from my grow shop to certain locations. Occasionally, there was a cannabis farm there. I also gave advice on how to set it up from time to time, but I never set up or owned anything." Despite his denials, Simo was sentenced to an additional 2 years in prison. After being released early, he immediately returned to his old ways of smuggling and selling drugs, but this time with a completely different approach. After the failed deal with undercover officers that led to the arrest of his 2 accomplices, Simo decided to sell drugs via the dark web to avoid face-to-face interactions, thereby reducing the risks. Selling on the dark web was suggested by his accomplice, Marcus, an intelligent individual often referred to as a nerd and nicknamed Glasses. The dark web is a hidden part of the internet that requires special software, configurations, or access permissions to reach. Users of the dark web can remain completely anonymous. On the dark web, numerous websites revolve around the buying and selling of drugs. Simo saw this as the perfect way to sell his products in the future and enlisted Marcus to set everything up. In no time, people from all over the world were placing orders and paying with Bitcoin. These orders would be received by Simo, who then distributed them to his accomplices at various storage facilities across the Netherlands. The accomplices would smuggle the drugs to a house in Germany, package the orders in envelopes, and send the parcels through various post offices and mailboxes. Simo recruited a man named Zakaria to help with this plan. Zakaria rented the house in Germany where the drugs would be smuggled to and from there. The orders would be packaged. Zakaria also hired people to package and send the orders. According to police records, Simo sold drugs worth millions of dollars worldwide. Using this new method, they had truly struck gold. However, This new approach only lasted for a short time because unfortunately, it led to trouble for Simo once again in 2015. By chance, witnesses in the German city of Gronau spotted a Mercedes parked in front of a mailbox. They then saw two men dropping off numerous packages, which wasn't unusual. However, these men were wearing gloves and appeared very cautious when handling the packages. Although everything seemed normal, something felt off, and the witnesses alerted a postal worker immediately after the men left. The postal worker decided to open a few of the packages, and they were all filled with drugs. The worker promptly contacted the police, and a total of 60 packages were seized. Not long after, Zakaria was stopped by the police in the very same Mercedes that the witnesses had seen. He claimed the car didn't belong to him, but to Simo. Simo was then arrested when the witnesses confirmed that they had seen him dropping off the packages into the mailbox. Simo was furious that Zakaria had confessed to the police and decided to exact revenge, but things quickly spiraled out of control. While being held in Gronau, Simo continued to lead his gang. He had multiple phones in his cell that he used to communicate through various apps under the names GF, Mr. Sosa, and Souza Souza. GF stood for Godfather. These phones allowed him to maintain the gang's operations and direct his subordinates, Marcus, Henri, and Moritz. What followed was absolute chaos back home, as Simo faced business conflicts as well as personal feuds. It all began on January 31st, 2017, when a man was driving home in his Renault Megane after hanging out with friends in Hengelo. Just as he sat down in his car, a man suddenly approached and fired multiple shots at close range. The victim was hit twice in the wrist and 4 times in the shoulder, but it seemed as though a miracle had occurred, allowing him to survive. He later stated on the Dutch TV show Opsporing Verzocht that he was incredibly lucky to be alive and insisted that he was not involved in any criminal activity and had no enemies. After investigating, the police concluded that he may have been the wrong target. The actual target came forward to the police after the incident. He lived in the same neighborhood, also drove a Renault Megane, and was connected to the criminal underworld. Henri, also known as the Big Wolf, was suspected to be the hitman on Simo's orders, although the motive behind the attack remains unclear. Just 2 days later, around 6:30 p.m. on February 2nd, 2017, a barber was cutting a customer's hair. Outside, a Seat Ibiza Cupra pulled up and parked by the roadside. Suddenly, a man walked into the barber shop and began pouring a flammable liquid on the barber before setting him on fire with a lighter. The barber was then engulfed in flames, burning alive. The customers in the barber shop frantically tried to extinguish the flames. One customer noticed a bucket of water that had just been used to clean the windows and quickly poured it over the barber, finally putting out the fire. When the ambulance arrived, the barber was immediately taken to the hospital, where doctors concluded that he had sustained second-degree burns covering 12.8% of his body. Surprisingly, this was an entirely innocent man. He had only bought the barber shop from the previous owner a month earlier, and it was the previous owner who was the actual target of the attack. To understand this incident better, we have to go back to the summer of 2016. While Simo was still imprisoned in Germany, his wife told him that she had an unpleasant encounter with the former owner of the barber shop, which she found highly distressing. Upon hearing this, Simo became incredibly angry and wanted to teach that person a lesson. From prison, he instructed some of his accomplices to gather information on this individual, learning that he owned a barber shop. Simo then sent instructions to Henri to severely beat the man, but Henri responded, "It's better to burn him alive. If he dies, so be it." Simo replied, unconcerned about whether the man survived. When Simo later discovered that the injured person was not his intended target, but someone else, he remained determined to seek revenge. Simo ordered his accomplices to track down his target, but the man had fled to Turkey. Simo then decided to focus on the target's relatives, in this case the man's younger brother. From April until May 23rd, Simo ordered a tracking device to be placed on the younger brother's car to monitor his every move. On May 24th, 2017, the time to act had arrived. As the younger brother was driving his Hyundai Getz in Gronau, Germany, a BMW began following him. He noticed that he was being tailed and started to speed up and slow down to test whether he was being followed, and the BMW did the same. He sped up and after a few sharp turns managed to lose the BMW. When he arrived home, he sat in his car to see if he was still being followed. Just as he was about to get out of the car, the BMW reappeared and a person stepped out from the passenger seat and fired 6 shots. The tracking device under the car had allowed the assailant to know the exact location of the target, and the younger brother couldn't escape. The shooter was Moritz, Henri's younger brother, also known as the Little Wolf. However, it seemed another miracle occurred because the target survived once again. At 3:15 a.m. on September 19, 2017, a car stopped in front of the Luxex Shisha Lounge in Enschede. The passenger got out of the car and fired 6 shots at the lounge's front door with an automatic weapon. The lounge was closed at the time and no one was inside. The shooter then returned to the car and fled the scene. Just a few minutes later, he fired 30 bullets into the front of a house, shattering the windows on both the upper and lower floors while the residents were still inside. Fortunately, no one was injured again. This house was located only 350 meters from the Shisha Lounge. Both addresses belonged to a member of the Satudara motorcycle club. But why? To understand the motive behind this attack, we have to look back a little further. Simo had entered into a fierce conflict with the Satudara motorcycle club. There are 2 theories about the cause of this conflict. The first theory is that members of Satudara visited Simo's grow shop and offered to protect him for a fee. Simo didn't want any protection and refused. He then aligned himself with the Tattoo Hitters, a group of hitmen who were enemies of Satudara. This led to a conflict that made Simo want to eliminate the members of Satudara. The second theory is much simpler. The conflict was purely about drug trafficking. Simo and Satudara had been vying for control of the area to sell drugs before Simo transitioned to selling on the dark web. When Satudara continued to sell in the area Simo claimed as his own, he resorted to violence to send a message. Remember Simo's former accomplice, Zakaria, who informed the authorities in Germany, leading to Simo's arrest? Simo hadn't forgotten about him. At around 2:45 a.m. on November 11, 2017, 2 men threw 2 bricks through the window of a house in Almelo. They then poured gasoline and other flammable liquids through the broken window and set the house on fire. At the time, a woman was sleeping in the front bedroom on the first floor of the house. She woke up and noticed the fire in the living room, allowing her to escape just in time. The fire caused most of the house to burn down, and the woman was none other than Zakaria's mother. It's important to note that while all of this was happening, Simo was still imprisoned in Germany. In 2020, Simo finished serving his sentence in Germany, but he wasn't released. Instead, he was transferred to the Netherlands, where a massive case was being built against him for all the crimes he had committed. With all the charges against him, prosecutors had enough evidence to build a strong case and demand a very long prison sentence for Simo. He was ultimately sentenced to 26 years and 8 months in prison. Many people immediately questioned why the sentence wasn't longer. According to prosecutors, the reason was that all the attacks had failed. Even though Simo had orchestrated much violence, but every attack he ordered was intended to take the victim's life, but unfortunately for him, none succeeded. Had they been successful, he might have been sentenced to life in prison. Journalists found it ironic that he called himself the Godfather, but continually failed. One remarked, "He was only feared because of his unpredictability and his ability to find people crazy enough to do the dirty work he ordered. His title suggests he wasn't really a godfather, he just sat in his small prison cell, giving orders to do this or that." Simo's accomplices, or those who carried out his orders, were tried starting in 2019, receiving sentences ranging from 6 to 18 years. In a completely unexpected twist, during a court hearing in July 2023, Simo and his lawyer were informed that Simo was on a target list. They couldn't reveal who was targeting him or the specific plans, but for now, since he remains in custody, the likelihood of anything happening to him is reduced. What do you think of this story? Leave your thoughts in the comments below so everyone can know. Don't forget to like and subscribe to support me. Thank you for watching. Goodbye.